When a waitress served Barron Trump at a quiet cafe, she expected nothing more than a routine shift. But what he left behind, a note and a tip, brought her to tears and sparked a conversation across the nation. The smell of espresso mixed with faint notes of fresh pastries lingered in the air. The afternoon lull had stretched longer than usual, and the hum of conversation in the cafe had finally tapered to a murmur. For Dinah, the shift felt like a marathon. Every tick of the clock seemed to slow. Every clink of cutlery was just another reminder that she'd been on her feet for hours. She wiped the last table by the window and checked her phone. Just one more hour. Rent was due in 2 days, and her phone bill sat unpaid. Tips that day had been pitiful, mostly small change tossed half-heartedly onto the table by busy patrons who never looked up from their phones. Dana exhaled, pulled her hair into a tighter ponytail, and grabbed the order pad. Her manager, an older woman with tired eyes, gave her a glance as if to say hang in there, but Dana was already on autopilot. Then the bell above the door rang. The sound startled her back into focus. A young man stepped in, tall, lean, dressed in a plain shirt and slacks that made him look effortlessly put together. 2 men followed close behind, blending almost too well into the backdrop, their sharp eyes taking in every corner of the room. The cafe wasn't exactly a hotspot for high-profile guests. It wasn't the kind of place where you'd expect celebrities, let alone someone who came with what looked like security. For a moment Dana froze, her pen hanging over the pad, but professionalism kicked in and she walked toward the table. In the far corner where the young man had settled, "Good afternoon," Dana said, trying to muster her best smile. "Can I get you something to start?" The young man looked up, and for a moment Dana nearly forgot what she was supposed to say. His face was striking, but there was something familiar about him, his features, the slight calmness in his expression. Then it clicked. Barron Trump. Dana had seen his face plastered across the news over the years, son of the former president. She felt her heart beat quicken, but she did what she was trained to do: stay calm. This was a customer, no more, no less. "I'll just have a cappuccino and maybe one of those croissants," Barron said softly, his voice polite but reserved. "Absolutely anything else?" He shook his head. "That'll be perfect, thank you." His words were simple, but his tone carried something Dana couldn't put her finger on. Kindness, maybe, or just sincerity. She scribbled the order, turned back toward the counter, and tried to shake off the flutter in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was nerves or exhaustion, but something about this moment stuck with her. As Dana prepared the coffee, she couldn't help but glance back toward the corner table. Little did she know this small interaction was about to turn her entire day and maybe her week on its head. The steam from the cappuccino machine hissed as Dana frothed the milk. She kept her movements deliberate, steady, anything to distract her from the odd nervous energy twisting in her stomach. "Why am I acting like this?" she thought. Barron Trump, of all people. Her eyes darted back to the table. He sat quietly, his posture straight but not stiff. He wasn't scrolling on a phone or typing away on a laptop like most patrons. He simply stared out the window at the street beyond, lost in his thoughts. Occasionally he sipped water from the glass she had dropped off earlier. By the time the cappuccino and croissant were ready, Dana had settled herself. She balanced the tray carefully and approached his table. "Here you go," she said, gently placing the cup and pastry down in front of him. He looked up and smiled faintly. "Thank you, you're welcome. Let me know if you need anything else," she replied, keeping her tone neutral but polite. As Dana turned to walk back to the counter, something stopped her. Maybe it was the feeling of his eyes still on her, curious but not invasive, or maybe it was just her own tiredness making her self-conscious. Either way, her heart fluttered again. Minutes passed and Dana busied herself with cleaning empty tables and refilling sugar containers. The cafe had grown quiet again, save for the faint hum of background music coming from the speakers. She felt the weight of the room in a way she hadn't before, like something invisible was pressing Against her urging her to pay attention, out of the corner of her eye Dana noticed Barron pull a pen from his pocket and lean over the receipt. As his meal came to an end, he scribbled something quickly, almost as if he didn't want anyone to notice, folded the paper neatly and tucked it beneath the empty coffee cup. Then he stood gathering his phone and coat. Dana watched him for a split second before she forced herself to focus. "Thank you for coming," she called out softly as he passed by. Barron turned back just slightly and smiled. "Have a good day." Those words lingered longer than they should have. Dana stood there frozen in the middle of the cafe, her eyes following him as he exited with his security close behind. The bell above the door chimed one last time and then the room was quiet again. She let out a slow breath, picked up her tray and made her way over to clear the table. The cappuccino cup sat empty, a small residue of foam clinging to its rim. Beside it, the croissant plate held nothing but crumbs, and there it was, the receipt. Dana picked it up carefully, the folded paper feeling heavier than it should have been. Her first thought was of the tip. Maybe it would be generous, but that wasn't uncommon with wealthy customers. They often threw money around to make up for their lack of interaction. But as she unfolded the receipt, the air in her chest vanished. At the bottom beneath the total was a number, a tip so large it made her stomach drop, 4 crisp digits. And above it a handwritten note: "Your kindness and hard work don't go unnoticed. My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming." Dana's hands began to tremble. She read the words again, this time slower, letting every sentence sink in. Her eyes darted to the door where Barron had disappeared, and her vision blurred as hot tears pooled in her eyes. Her knees felt weak. She stumbled back into the empty chair across from where he'd sat and just stared. The note, the tip, it wasn't about the money, it was the words, the weight of empathy written in ink by someone she never imagined would notice her existence. For the first time in weeks, months, even Dana felt seen. As the tears streamed down her face, she thought about what those words meant. But this moment wasn't over. Not yet. Someone else would see the note, and Dana's story was about to ripple far beyond the walls of the cafe. The sound of the cafe door opening jolted Dana from her trance. She wiped her tears quickly with the back of her hand, tucking the note into her apron pocket as her manager approached. "You okay?" her manager asked, narrowing her eyes in concern. "What happened?" Dana hesitated for a second, trying to find the right words. I'm fine," she said, though her voice cracked slightly. Just a really generous tip." Her manager raised an eyebrow. "Not convinced generous enough to make you cry." Dana nodded, managing a shaky laugh as she reached for the folded receipt and held it out there. Moment her manager saw the number, she let out a low whistle. "No way. Who left this corner table?" Dana replied, her voice softer now. "That was Barron Trump." Her manager blinked. "The Barron Trump? Are you serious?" "Yeah," Dana said, pulling the note from her pocket. "But it's not just the money." She handed the note over carefully as though it might crumble in her hands. Her manager read it, and for the first time in months, Dana saw a genuine softness in her boss's eyes. "Wow," she whispered, handing the note back. That's something else. It really is," Dana agreed, folding the note again like it was some kind of treasure. "I don't even know why he wrote it. I didn't do anything special." Her manager looked at her for a long moment. "Sometimes people just know, Dana. They can see what you're going through. Even if you think you're hiding it, you're here every day working your tail off, always kind to customers, even the ones who don't deserve it." Maybe he saw that. Dana swallowed hard. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. For months she'd been treading water, working double shifts to pay rent, skipping meals to make sure she could cover her mom's prescriptions. She'd been kind because it was the only part of herself she hadn't let the world take away, and somehow he'd seen that. As the minutes passed, a strange buzz filled the cafe. A couple of co-workers whispered by the pastry display pointing toward the table where Barron had sat. News traveled quickly, and it wasn't long before one of the baristas came up to her. "You served him, didn't you?" The girl asked her voice somewhere between excitement and disbelief. What did he say? Was he nice? Dana smiled. Faintly, yeah, he was really nice, man. I'd freak out. The barista laughed. That's so crazy. Dana didn't say anything more. She didn't want to explain the note or the tip. Somehow sharing it felt like taking something sacred and putting it on display. For now it was hers. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Every interaction felt lighter. Somehow every table she cleared a little easier. When she finally pulled off her apron at the end of the day, the folded note remained safe in her pocket. As Dana made her way to the subway station, she found herself holding the receipt again, staring at the words, "My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming." She whispered the sentence under her breath, as though saying it aloud would make it real. He didn't have to write that. She thought he didn't have to care, but he did. And as the train rumbled through the tunnels, Dana closed her eyes and allowed herself to believe, for the first time in a long time, that maybe things would get better. But what Dana didn't know was that this quiet moment would soon echo much louder than she ever imagined. The note wouldn't stay a secret for long. The next morning, the sun barely peeked through Dana's apartment window when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She groaned, rolling over to check the screen. Dozens of notifications flooded her lock screen. "Why is everyone texting me?" she mumbled, squinting at the messages. "Girl, is this you? You're famous. Is this real?" Her thumb hovered over one message that included a link. It was a screenshot of the Daily Post headline, "Barron Trump leaves Waitress." A touching note and a huge tip. Internet reacts. Dana sat bolt upright, her heart hammering in her chest as she clicked the link. The article told the story word for word. A struggling waitress, an unexpected guest, a note full of empathy, and a tip that seemed to have changed her life. The photo attached was of the note itself, her note written in Barron's neat handwriting. Dana's hands shook as she scrolled. How did this happen? She opened another message from one of her co-workers, "The guy at table 5 yesterday." Someone must have seen the note and snapped a picture. It's everywhere now. Her heart dropped. Everywhere. She flipped through her social media accounts, and sure enough, it was all there on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. The note had gone viral. Hundreds of comments poured in. "This is what the world needs more of. Barron Trump seems like such a kind soul. I don't care what anyone says. This is beautiful. Wait, what about the waitress? I hope she's okay." The more Dana read, the more overwhelmed she felt. Strangers debated her story, her life, without knowing a single thing about her. She dropped the phone onto her bed and buried her face in her hands. "What do I do now?" she whispered to herself. The sound of her mom's cough echoed from the next room, pulling Dana back to reality. She couldn't afford to lose her head over this, not with bills to pay and groceries to buy. But even as she picked up her bag and hurried off to work, the pit in her stomach remained. She wasn't ready for her story to belong to the world. The cafe was different.